Hello, hello. This is nice.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. It's an immense pleasure to have Mat Dillon here with us. An actor who's been a constant presence in films we love for many, many years. I won't say how many. But to describe him only as an actor, I think it would be a disservice to him, because he's kind of a Renaissance man, basically. And the reasons he's here for kind of talks about that. Yesterday we watched Being Maria. Tonight, his latest film. No, yesterday, yes, we did that. Tonight we're going to be watching City of Ghosts, a film he directed back in the first film he directed back in 2002. But he's also here for another reason. Jesper's Used installation, the opening of which will be today at 5. But apart from all these, he's also a passionate lover and connoisseur and collector of music, especially Cuban and Latin music. He's an acclaimed painter with a big career. So this is it, Mat Dillon. So give him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Great. It's great to be here in Thessaloniki.
You've been here before.
It was very briefly, yes, but it's a beautiful city.
Let's start from yesterday night. In Jessica Palud's film, you are playing, you are acting as Marlon Brando. A film about the shooting of Last Tango in Paris, in Ali Bertolucci's film. And I know that Marlon Brando has been an influence in your career. I know that in your first film you did, the director was jokingly calling you Marlon. It's something you have talked about. So how was it playing this character, let's say, an actor too?
Well, I couldn't resist doing it when I read the script, and of course being Brando is very influential, not just on me, but of all actors. I mean, he changed things, you know, for multiple times. I think he changed the whole game, you know, for actors. And so I liked the script, and I thought that the depiction was fair, you know, and honest, and so I couldn't resist. But really, it was the idea that to play Brando was something that I couldn't resist. Then later on, I was like, you idiot! Why did you choose to do this? Because it's such a difficult thing. I mean, he's probably one of the most interesting people of the 20th century. You know, but. It was difficult, you know, to do it, but I liked the challenge of it. And when I remembered when they called me to tell me, oh, congratulations, that, you know, they were involved in the film and the film's going to be premiering in Cannes, I was like, oh, that's nice. And I was thinking about how I was going to try to wiggle out of not going, so I wouldn't have to go, because I hadn't seen the film, and I was like, oh, how am I going to get out of this? And then I watched the film. Well, the first thing I thought is like, look, you take risks, right? It's what I've always done, you know, for the most part, is I'll take risks doing different jobs. And this is just another one of those things. And that's what I admired about Marlon Brando. And it's what is important, but always been important to me as an actor. So to play him was an opportunity that I couldn't resist. So I had to do it.
Did you ever have the chance to meet him while he was alive?
No, I never did. I never got to meet him. No.
But I suppose
but I didn't.
I suppose that this challenge of playing him on screen was not the only reason that you did the film. And the themes that he talks about it's really interesting. And I'm wondering, since you are one of those actors who started very early, very young to have a career, was that something that added an extra layer for you?
Well, it's in that way, yes, it's a very interesting question that you posed, because there was a whole personal side to doing that part and doing that film. I'd seen the film when I was very young, and it had an influence on me. It's a great film. I still think it's an important, really a masterpiece, and if you can say in cinema, you know. And but yes, like I said, I saw it when I was young, and as you stated, I started acting at a very young age, and that. So, and after I made my second film, I enrolled at the Lee Strasberg Institute for my studying acting. And of course, that Lee Strasberg, and it was all about Marlon Brando and James Dean and Montgomery Clift. These were the actors that we admired, you know, and to this day, they are, I say, the triumvirate of actors that changed the way people worked in the process, and they were coming from the method and etc. And but on the other side of it, so there was that part of being a young person, and then there's the other part, which is also this, the story of Maria Schneider, who was also very young when she started, and so I had a lot of empathy for. I mean, her situation is different. I mean, what she went through on that film. Sorry, there's no translating, or is everybody okay?
Everyone understands, yes.
Everybody understands, okay. It's a different situation, but I understand, I can identify somewhat with being a young person, not really having agency over what you're doing or what you can say or setting boundaries, etc. And so I was very moved. And I was very moved by the performance of Anna Maria Bartolome in the film in the end. And I said, I'm very proud to have been a part of this. And yet, and I do not say that in any way to cast any shadows on Bernardo Bertolucci. He made a mistake with that, but he's a brilliant filmmaker, you know. And I don't think their intentions were to do something sadistic. It was not this. They were seeking something, and it was just a different time and it was a mistake. It was an insensitivity, and it was ultimately she was traumatized by that experience. And I think if you're familiar at all with the story of Maria, then you know what I'm talking about, right? And so it was very tricky. I mean, for me, I always feel that I will always look at Marlon Brando and with great, I feel a debt of gratitude as one of the greatest actor, a great influence on me. And I think it's the kind of thing that a lot of actors, when Marlon Brando came on the scene, probably since before I was born, actors never wanted to be compared to Marlon Brando in a way because it's intimidating. It's like he was such a great, or to even acknowledge how important he was, you know. And I think the things that I value as an actor still, but the things that were instilled in me when I started acting young were vulnerability, being a very important thing for actors to reveal, and to have that, to be open in that way, and also spontaneity, another very important thing. And that's what Brando did. That's what James Dean was doing on the screen, and that wasn't being done. That wasn't. You didn't see that. So you think about the image of the American man, right? Marlon Brando changed that. He's not John Wayne, you know. It's different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You touched upon the responsibilities of a director when you spoke about Bernardo Bertolucci. And you have been a director as well, and you did City of Ghosts, which we are going to see tonight. I was wondering, what made you want to go into filmmaking as a director, and why did you choose this project? I mean, it would have been much easier to do a film in a Hollywood backlot instead of Cambodia, but...
Well, yeah, or to do like a kitchen sink drama. You know, kitchen sink drama?
Yes.
Everything happens in the kitchen. Of families and their problems and difficulties. We call them kitchen sink dramas. They're a lot easier logistically to make than to go off and make a movie in Cambodia, where they had no film industry at the time, although thankfully that is changing now. I was just there recently. But why did I choose that film? That's a very good question. Because, you know, I've always wanted to direct, and I had directed some things, small things, of some television and music videos, things like that. But even doing those things, there's a different kind of gratification that you get, because film is ultimately a director's medium, you know? And so, as an actor, it's an incredibly important part of the job. I mean, of making films, acting, writing, these elements are so important. But it's ultimately a medium, and it's a relatively modern concept, the idea, the film director. Cinema's relatively young, but I've always wanted to direct, and you know, and so this film was an idea that had been percolating for some time before I started writing it, and it was based on some people that I knew, some real people. One guy in particular who disappeared, and we knew him in New York, and he was an older guy, and he was a con man. He was a scam artist, a confidence man, you know. And we thought he was dead, you know, and he turned up in Southeast Asia, and then another guy that I knew who was a shady kind of guy, was involved in all kinds of activity, criminal activity, etc., told me the whole story of everything, and then it just brought up all this, and so of course that was the basis of the original idea. It was based on this real thing and these real people, but then of course it turned into something else, and for me it was inspired by my own disappointment, my own disenchantment of not just what's going on in the film industry, you know, with the types of movies that are being made, etc. But personally, for me, how things were shaping up. I remember being very disappointed that I didn't get a film, that I wasn't offered a film that I didn't even want. And then that's when I said to myself, man, you have lost, you're totally lost, because you don't even want that. That's not what you're interested in doing. And so that's when I embarked on this journey, and I called Barry Gifford, who's a very good writer. Barry Gifford, American author, a collaborator of David Lynch, but I've known Barry for a long time, very long time, and I called him, I said, listen, I have this idea, and the idea was, you know, a young guy travels to across the world to go find his mentor, and he wasn't supposed to go to find him, and what happens as a result of his going there, because of this kind of shady business dealings, etc. And Barry, when I said, I want to do this movie, he said, great, it's about time, and then we started writing it, and it took forever to get it written. But, you know, it's a journey, you know, and for me, I learned a lot, you know. It was like for me to get into writing more. It's always nice to be able to, try something else and develop develop yourself in a new way, and writing and storytelling. And I really like storytelling, and I really like writing, you know. And so that was fun to do that. It was a very fulfilling experience. It took many years to get made, but I was very, very happy with the experience of doing it. Yeah.
Even though it took you some time to get back to the director's chair, with, and you did a documentary, Grand Fellowe, which was also a personal connection, I suppose. It was a musician that you absolutely love, from what I understand, and this was the reason why you wanted to make a film about him?
Yeah, well, this was probably even before I filmed City of Ghosts, I had already shot some footage of this old Cuban scat singer named El Gran Feo. He was a Cuban scat singer, and he was a very unique individual. He was a great artist, but a showman, a performer, a real showman. I mean, he was a great songwriter, singer, and performer, but he was also a showman, and he had been quite popular in the 50s, but it faded from popularity for a long time. And a friend of mine, he was a musician, and he and I shared the same love of Afro-Cuban music and jazz music, etc. And I had heard about this guy Feove, that he was, when I had been in Cuba, people told me, hey, this guy Feove was great, you know, and I never heard of him. And then I discovered his music. And he was a scat singer. He was the first Cuban scat singer. And scat is a kind of jazz music where people it's vocalizing without words, you know. It's a jazz, it's an improvisational form that he was a master in doing that in Cuba. He did it, so there were of course other scat singers in Cuba, but they were doing it in the North American jazz style. Mm-hmm. He did it, brought more African elements and more Cuban elements to it. Anyway, so just to get back to this, he was very old when I first met him, and I had encouraged my friend to go make a record with him in Mexico City, where he was living. And he went, and I went to film them while they were making the record. And he thought I was like somebody that was working, you know, the cable wrangler, you know, the guy moving the cables around or something. And so he was like, who's this guy who's just disrupting the rehearsals, you know? And he didn't know who I was, which was okay. I was okay with that. But then eventually he began to find out that, oh, this was the guy who really inspired the guy to come make the record, and he really is a fan of your work, and he's filming because he wants to. So then he started to get these ideas that I was going to like be his, you know, take. And it was at the time of when of his Social Club had come out, right? So he was a peer of those people. In fact, he was maybe more of an innovator, because he was part of a movement called the feeling movement. And they use the English word feeling, sentimiento in Spanish, right? But they used that English word because they would hear it in American jazz music, feeling all the time. And so then they became known as the youth of the feeling movement, and that was back in the 40s. So he had gone so far back, and he was thinking that maybe that I would help him to achieve this kind of, maybe he had unrealistic expectations maybe of what would happen. And he made the record with Joey, I filmed it, and I put it on the shelf because I didn't know what to do with it for a very long time. I had this great footage, it was very good, interesting, but I had no idea. I wasn't a documentary filmmaker, so I just put it away. But then my love of the music never changed, and I always thought that there was something there. And then I started to see that people were making documentaries that there's another way to do it. We come from the scripted or fiction background. We tend to film the movie and then edit it, and that's it. Well, documentaries you can film, and then go edit, and go film, and go edit, and go film, go back and forth. That's part of the process. So I reopened the project, but anyway, it was a long project in the making, but for me it was enjoyable because of my love of the music. So in many ways it's more, you know, I'm serving that more than I'm serving some cinematic voice. It's more about that music and about those people and my love of that music.
Yeah, I can understand the passion just hearing you talk about it. And speaking of enjoyable, what was enjoyable being in an MRI machine for Jasper used for interferes? And why? What did you make you want to work with him?
Well, Jasper, I had met. We became very good friends right away. We hit it off right away. I was in an exhibition of my paintings, my artwork in Berlin, and he was also exhibiting in the same place, doing one of his installations. And so we got to know each other a little bit, and we stayed in touch. And then he said, I have an idea for a project. I said, okay. And then he told me the idea was to film my brain in an MRI while I was acting. And I wasn't sure. But I said, okay, well, let's keep the conversation going. I wasn't 100% sure. But we stayed in touch, and, you know, and he told me more about the idea, and then it's really interesting to me, the idea of this idea of examining the brain to see how much activity there is when we're acting as opposed to, because they do study the brain when they've done studies obviously showing people images and certain things to bring up certain emotions and see how they react. But to do it when it's acted, when it's performative, you know, it was an interesting thing. I wanted to be part of it. Now, if it was science, you know, and Jasper said this to me, he said, look, if it was science, they would have to do it with 20 actors, you know. That would be science, but this is art, so we just do it with you. And it was a good experience. And so I was actually working here in Greece in Pilio, shooting a film with Fernando Troieba, and Jasper would say, hey, listen, we're gonna do this thing. Are you sure we're gonna be on? Yes, of course, of course. I was busy working, you know. And it was to be shot in Paris at the Brain Institute. And then I finished, and then I finally looked at the document that they sent me, and it was like, if you have claustrophobia, you might want to consider that MRI is not for you. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I'm claustrophobic. I don't know about this. But I spoke to Jasper, and I even tried to get him to, well, why don't you get, you know, go ask my friend Charlotte Gainsbourg in Paris. She's there, she'll do it maybe, you know. I was trying to get him to use somebody else. And he said, no, Matt, it has to be you. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go forward. And you know, again, it's one of those things, I'm glad that I did it because it was an experience that I never had before, you know, and it was really good. And, you know, at first, my feeling was so Jasper had written a bunch of text, you know, and they were interesting, but I thought, well, maybe I can work on something with you. And his ideas were much better than mine. So in the end, I just used, his text was great, and it was emotional, you know, and so it was interesting because it's performative, and they did see activity in the brain. So it was kind of an experiment and kind of a work of art all in one, simultaneously. And the other good thing was that the doctor who was there, the physician, he was able to look and see if there were any problems, you know, in my brain. And as he said, and he came to me and he was very enthusiastic, and he said, you have a very healthy brain. I said, really? He says, no. You have one of the top 20% brains that I've ever seen. It's very healthy. And I said, really? I said, smart. And he went, healthy. And I said, I said, Doc, I think you're looking at the wrong brain. But in fact, no, it was Jasper was very smart, intelligent. It was good to be a part of it, and we showed it. Jasper said, "Will you come to Denmark?" And I was living in Rome at the time to show the movie. We're going to premiere it there, and I was like, "Yeah," and I was able to go, and I called Lars von Trier. And I said, "Lars, I want you to come, man. You have to come check this out." And he never goes to any of these things, and he came. And he really welcomed me. Which was a big deal because he's a very beloved figure, especially in Denmark, you know.
we're going to be talking about all this with the people here in the theater as well. But before I open these two questions, you mentioned that you met Jesper in an exhibition, and I wanted to talk about your paintings, your art, and because it's a parallel career to your film work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I always, I like painting. I come from a visual family in that way. My father was a portrait painter, and so all my uncles were famous cartoonists, and so from childhood, there's always a lot of energy and interest put into drawing and painting, etc. But the type of work that I do now in painting or collage or drawing really has very little to do with what with my family background, etc. And so, yeah, it's one of these things that I would do periodically when I was younger, but I never did very large work. And then I just became more interested in about 8 years ago. I started to be more of a regular practice of drawing, painting, collage. I would do, and at different times, for example, when I would be like on location, when I made City of Ghosts, there was 2 years straight where I would keep a sketchbook and draw collage and do things, and even write poetry or whatever, and I would do this as a regular practice, and then other times I would stop doing that, and I found myself in my friend's kitchen, right, with the kids. They had all the crayons and stuff, with the paper, with the kids, and I started to doodle, and I was like, I miss this, and it triggered something in me, and then I just started to go from there, and I love it. It's just, look, all of these things are creative processes, or there's a lot of, there are a lot of similarities in them, and so I find myself, for example, if I'm drawing, or I'm painting, I'll think of things that I heard, let's say, from a director that I worked with, or a writer, somebody, and I'll somehow apply it to this other thing that I'm doing. Like, for example, there was when we made the house that Jack built for Lars von Trier, had these signs that said "Husk og sjusk," which is not a real word in Danish, but it's a slang thing that translates to saying, remember to keep it messy, to keep things messy, So I remember that one. That's easy for me, to keep it messy. And you can ask my ex-girlfriend. But also it translates to draw outside the lines. So then I find myself, these things cross over. I am definitely of the type of person, there are some people that they work in one thing and they do it very, very well. Like, maybe there's some people that are painters and they just paint, not just they just paint, but they paint one specific thing and they do it very well. And then there are other people who like to do many different things, and that's me. I'm very free in that way, as you mentioned earlier, and that's just who I am. I like to do different things. I want to be free, discover new things creatively. So, that's I'm interested in other things, and I think it keeps you young, to do other things as well. I mean, I remembered that writing City of Ghosts, first time I written a screenplay, I felt like a kid again, like discovering something new that I hadn't done, and it was exciting,
Wonderful. Are there any questions from the audience? Janice?
I feel like I've had my back to the audience.
Good morning, it's a pleasure to have you here. I want to make a different question about the political scene in US.
Oh, I knew that one was coming. I knew that was going to come.
It had to be. So since we are in the middle of election US thriller right now, where did you give your vote to?
Well, I voted before I came because I had to vote. you know, when I agreed to come to Thessaloniki, I didn't realize it was going to be right. But it's okay. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm here. Everything's going to be okay. But yeah, of course I voted. Without getting into a long, political, I have my views in general, but I'll just say that I voted for Kamala Harris. That's personally my choice, and I'll leave it at that. And I feel strongly that she's the best candidate, for me. And yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your time. I'm just curious because I saw you were at the screening of The Return a couple of days ago, and the Ray Fiennes and Juliette Binoche film that is here. And how important is it for you to be able to use these festivals and the opportunities that you have to keep in touch with films from your contemporaries in general?
Well, first of all, I think The Return is I really love this film. And, we were talking about the acting, and Ray Fiennes absolutely gives an incredible performance. And again, it's back to that thing of the vulnerability. I mean, the performance is really outstanding. But also the filmmaking was great. I don't want to make this about The Return, but it really was great. And I knew Uberto, the director, for many years. And I knew him before he was the director. I knew him when he was working with David Putnam, who was a great producer. And he was working production that way. And I was so impressed with how he had developed it as a director. And so it is nice to, when you come to festivals, I hadn't seen Uberto for years, and to see him and Rafe, who I know, it was great to see him and to be able to meet, Juliette, who's a wonderful actress, and see these other people, and that's always great. But I think I've also been on the jury of film festivals too, and I think what's really good about it, sometimes I'm not necessarily, I think it's great if somebody honors me and gives me an award for something I did, and I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to be, but at the same time, I don't think it's, I don't take it so seriously, because there's a lot of people that don't get awards that do wonderful work, right? So we look at it in that sense. But I've been on the jury at film festivals, and what's good about it is you see a lot of films, and you begin to, you learn for yourself what's important to you in a film by watching movies. What's important here? How it affects you? What's important? And the thing that I discover in seeing a lot of films is that what's important to me is emotion. That emotion is the most important thing. And I don't mean in a very sentimental way, but emotion is very important. It's more important than information, for example, in documentaries. Like, I made a documentary, and that was a big lesson I learned, is that all the data, all the dates, names, numbers, all these things are secondary to people, to the human experience, and to characters. And so I like to watch films, and festivals is a great way to do it, because you're not watching somebody's link on a computer, you get to have that magical experience that we have in cinema,
Hello, this is Yanis. Congratulations for everything, and especially being Maria. And since you have mentioned the word vulnerable quite a lot, I would like to ask you, besides Marlon Brando in Being Maria, can you name a couple of times that you have been vulnerable on a set of a film?
Wow, well, on the set, you mean as in the performance? Well, I mean, it is a part of the human, it's who we are, right? We're vulnerable. I don't know, it's always just been a very important thing as an actor, right? For me, and then the way that the things that were important are to be vulnerable, to allow that sensitivity there. You have to be sensitive to be an actor in that way. You have to be able to expose that part of yourself. I mean, when you ask me that question, I can't think, it's more of the question, has there ever been a film that you haven't, where you've been afraid and you decided to not allow yourself to be vulnerable? It's always been important for me. It's always been an important, part of the process. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to ask you, what the Marlon Brando did was not okay then, but it was not so clear as today. Do you feel that nowadays there are cases like this that happen in sets, or Me Too movement has contributed not to exist? And what about you? Do you feel like as a male director and a male actor that you're more cautious nowadays in such situations?
It's so funny because I've done so many films. We've done love scenes and we've done sex scenes and all this stuff, and it's never easy. It's never easy. So now they have a new. Yes, it's a new profession, intimacy coordinator. Never had one before on any movie. This was the first one, was being Maria. And I said to the woman, I said, you know that your job is because of that scene. If you trace back, if you everyone say, well, where does the role of the intimacy coordinator, where does it come from? You could probably trace it all the way back to that scene on that set in Last Tango in Paris. And those scenes are always difficult, and people sometimes will think, oh wow, that must have been great, you're with that beautiful woman or those beautiful women, you got to do that scene. I'm like, yeah, well, you don't even know. It's a little bit like, I think that the role of the intimacy coordinator, and a lot of people will say, a lot of people will be against it because it takes away from the director, and this idea of policing, and I agree with that. You don't want someone there that's just going to try and make sure that everybody behaves a certain way. No. I think what can be good about the intimacy coordinator is to give everybody a safe place to be, right? So everybody has their concerns or fears, right? So if you have an intimacy coordinator, it can actually be a person that allows, creates more allows more possibilities to exist, because everybody has different concerns or fears. They're not all the same. And if you can get, you have coordinators in other areas, You have stunt coordinators, and they help. There's no reason an intimacy coordinator has to be a negative thing. It doesn't have to be a police presence, like you're not allowed to do this, this, or this. I think they're there to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with what they're doing, right? In that situation. And there might be some things that somebody's uncomfortable with, but they're not uncomfortable with other things. Well, isn't that a good thing to know? Then maybe you can build your scene, I think it's actually not a bad thing. I think the intimacy coordinator can be a really an additive thing, as opposed to being, like a policing people's, like, you're not allowed to do this. No, that's not what it is. But I don't know if it's evolved to that point yet, because I have not had that many intimacy coordinator scenes. But I've heard funny stories too. They want you to wear a suit of armor when you're doing a love scene to make sure that there's nothing is touching. That's BS. A suit of armor.
Yeah.
Well, she actually took part of my question, But while I was watching it, I went back to the 80s where we were allowed to watch the film, and I felt that we had a completely different idea of what Last Tango in Paris was. And last night I felt that we came in a different era, if you know what I mean. I mean, we liked Marlon Brando then, we thought he was very sexy and all of it was very sexy. And today, if you talk to young people, they will think differently. In what way has your thinking, if it has changed, in what ways it has changed since you were younger, as an actor, as a creator, and as a person, your feelings and your thinking?
You know, listen, the thing that I was more concerned about with that movie, being Maria, that it would become a political movie of some kind, you know, a dogmatic movie about, you know, it's a personal story, you know, and that's what I think the director, she had the sensitivity to make a personal story. This is not a story about, you know, feminism. It's not a story. It's a story about a human being, you know, first and foremost. And I think that it's truthful. I mean, the story was the book was written by Maria's niece, and you know, she gave voice to Maria in a way that I think needed to be said. And look, there are many points of view on everything, and this is a legitimate one, her point of view of her experience and what she went through. I mean, they also talked about, you know, there are many, I think the mistake is to simplify this thing and say, oh, these were these abusive men and they did this horrible thing to this woman. There are so many elements that complicate the whole story. I mean, her life was already a very unstable life because of her family background, because of her family of origin things. And so when she got on that set, it was the worst possible scenario for her, you know, to be in a situation like that. And so I don't know. I think I must say I believe that Last Tango in Paris is a fantastic film. It's an important movie. It's one of my favorite films, and I'm not kidding when I say that. And I still believe that. And I think what Marlon Brando did as an actor was game-changing for actors. He changed everything, you know. And Bertolucci is a brilliant filmmaker. However, what they did in that particular, and by the way, when I say that, I look at the Last Tango in Paris, right? And I can't speak for the other people involved in this film, etc. That was the only scene in the film that I didn't like, and I really mean that. It was felt a little bit out of place to me. And I love this film, you know, Last Tango in Paris, and I think it's a masterpiece. And I think Maria also has its own place. It being Maria is an important thing as well. To hear that point of view, I was proud to be a part of that, you know. And I think they were trying to make art. They were trying to make something, really push things a certain way, and they made a mistake, because it's one thing to say to an actor or for a director to say, oh, I'm not going to tell the actor what we're going to do, or for the actor to say, I'm not going to tell the other actor what we're going to do. We all are okay with that, but not with a scene of like that. And that was, you can't, it's different. And this is something that was a major mistake. I think it was, you know, caused great trauma for her. And I also think, having started acting at a young age, where I'm very sensitive to exploitation, and I don't know that they thought they were exploiting her, but there was exploitation in this scenario. But I believe that the trauma was ongoing for her. It wasn't because of, maybe how she felt the end of that day, she was not happy. Obviously, we see that in the film, and that was true of in the case that she was very unhappy, but I think it probably got worse when she saw what was there, and then to feel abandoned, which was already part of her history, you know. So, I don't know, I think we have to look at the film. It's still a great work. Last Tango in Paris, in my opinion. And Marie Schneider's performance should not be overlooked because it's a great performance as well. It's just something that unfortunately traumatized her, and it was traumatic. And that's why I think that the film, it's a pivotal part of her story, but it's not her whole story. You know, she had a whole life that came before that as well. And I think that the Jessica, I was happy because I was moved by the film. I didn't feel like, somebody said to me that they felt the film was like a revenge, and they said it in a positive way, that it was revenge. This isn't about revenge at all. This is not about revenge, you know. This is a story of, how do you say, it is shedding light and bringing light to something that happened, and to give voice. I mean, she wasn't able to give voice herself because she's dead. She was not able to do that, but this does give another point of view, which I think is legitimate, you know. But I will always think of Last Tango in Paris as a masterpiece, and, you know, I still believe that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dillon. Welcome to our city. Welcome to our beloved festival. We're delighted and honored by your presence here.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Allow me a question. To be honest, I've been dying to ask you this question for years. Well, it's on my mind forever, and long last, the stars are lined, have lined. All right. So here comes my question. Sorry, I'm nervous. Here comes my question. Many compare your work with legends like James Dean, Marlon Brando, of course, Montgomery Clift, often noting the noon, this heart in your roles. You mentioned Gene Hackman as an influence key, especially for this nuanced sensitivity he brought to his characters. Could you please share with us how this Hackman's example has impacted your approach to acting, and how on earth have you developed this explosive and magical blend of toughness and sensitivity in your
Very nice. Very
in your performances?
That's-
Well, sorry, and now I can feign at ease for actually spoken to Mat Dillon. Thank you.
Okay, so the question was about Gene Hackman, right? Okay, so, well, you know, I started acting very young, so I did get to learn from some of the great old actors. I mean, fortunately, I was able to do this movie with Gene Hackman, and I didn't like the script, but the only reason I wanted to do the film was to work with him because he's a great actor, and I wanted to have that experience. And so that's, you know, and of course I learned a lot, and sometimes that's the, I mean, I've done a lot of films, some of them good, some of them not good, you know, it's an actor's life, you know, we have to, there's the averages, you know, it's just an actor's life, so, but you know, you hope to learn something no matter what, you learn from, you know, the ones that are good and the ones that aren't good, and you learn from working with people. And when you work with someone like Gene Hackman, yeah, you know, he's great, and not always easy as a person to work with. But I was a young actor, and it really helped me. You know, it was very, very supportive in that way. You know, but also just in watching him and his focus and his discipline. You know, that was good for me to see at that age, because I think when I was acting when I was younger, as I said, I studied at Lee Strasberg, and I was very much a method actor, you know, always looking for the truth, and it always had to be about the character, and so, but my techniques suffered a little bit. So I was younger, you know, I didn't know, and what I learned watching Gene was that he could take bad writing and make it totally bring conviction and believability to anything that he did. And you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that the writing was bad in the film that we did, but he taught me about your responsibility as an actor, right? To your character, to the craft, to what you're doing, and to bring that life. And you know, he would say simple things like, he would say, "Fill up," before the scene, just fill up, like cocking a pistol, you know what I mean? Just being ready, you know, there. And simple things, and he was very, very, you know, so I liked working with him when I was younger. I mean, you know, that was the best part of that whole experience for me. But I've worked with lots of actors I've worked with, and directors and filmmakers. And that's one of the good things, but when you start young, is you learn on the job. That's the good thing, and that's the thing that's not so good too, because you're learning, so you're going through that, and you're doing it right there, but there's a lot of pressure because you have to deliver in the film. So, but I was fortunate to work with some good people early on, to be around good people.
Last question.
Hi, thank you for being here and for your time. I think we all have a million questions, but we cannot let you go without asking something about our pride and joy. You worked with Yorgos Lanthimos at a short film. Could you let us know how did you get the offer to collaborate with him, and how was the whole experience?
Yeah, well, I was shooting my documentary in Cuba. In fact, I was in Havana doing some filming there, and I got a call that, oh, Yorgos Lanthimos has a short film, and he wants you to do this. And it's an odd movie. And of course, I liked his work. I was a fan of his work. Well, I knew I'd seen like Lobster. I'd seen a couple things, you know. I don't know if I'd seen yet. Maybe I had seen the what? Dogtooth. No, the one I'm thinking of is the one that won the favorite. The favorite. Of course, the favorite. Excuse me. But of course, I mean, he's a wonderful filmmaker. He's a real voice, and the answer was yes, that I would want to work with him, because I think he's one of the true, you know, unique voices. One of the few really unique voices in cinema in the world, and so of course I'm going to work with him, you know, because that's the greatest thing an actor can have, is the opportunity to work with a filmmaker who has a voice, and to help them with their vision, also to be a part of that is really great. But making that film, well, I remember there was a scene where I had to eat one hard-boiled egg. One hard-boiled egg. 24. I think I ate about 2 dozen eggs in that scene. But, what's that?
Cool Hand Luke for you.
Oh yeah, right, exactly. Like Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke. Yeah, I had to eat all these hard-boiled eggs. No, but there was, it was a really unusual movie, and there was a wonderful actress, Daphne. She's a Greek actress. I think she's half Greek. I don't think she's 100% Greek.
She's Greek. She's not from Vatican.
But she's Greek,
yeah,
and French, no?
Or
she lives in France,
yeah,
but she's Greek, yeah. Daphne. And Yorgos was amazing. I mean, he was very, he knows what he wants, you know? He really knows what he wants. He's got a, and I couldn't figure out what the, and I would go up to him and I would keep trying to tell him, I think I figured it out. He would look at me. And sometimes I think I nailed it. And then other times I think he was curious. He found it was interesting what I had come up with. I still don't know what it's about, but I think it's amazing and really interesting film. I was glad to have done it, you know. It was great to work with him. And we shot it in Mexico City, you know. And all it makes me, I want to work with Yorgos again, because he's great. It was great experience to work with him, you know, on a short, but do a longer one. He's fantastic. Yeah, and you're lucky to have such a great, great filmmaker. But I think probably he belongs to everybody, right? He belongs to all of us, right? He's Greek, but he belongs to all of us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank you for letting us pick your brain a bit, which we can all say, I think that it's not only very healthy, but it's very clever indeed. So, thank you very much.